The wind screamed across the desert, carrying sharp grains of sand that stung like knives. The horizon was swallowed in a wall of swirling gold and brown. Kalen had seen sandstorms before, but this one was different. It was alive, twisting with strange energy, making his skin crawl beneath his cloak. He knew he had only minutes before visibility dropped to nothing. The shelter was his only hope, a narrow cave carved into the side of a jagged dune. Inside, the air was cooler, but the roar outside still echoed through the stone. Kalen set down his pack, checking the seals on the water canister. He was used to being alone out here. As far as he knew, there were no other humans left on this world. The last war had seen to that, or so the histories said. But the sound of footsteps crunching in the sand behind him froze him in place. A figure appeared in the cave's entrance, her silhouette outlined by the storm's golden haze. She stepped inside, pulling back the hood of her flowing desert robe. Her skin was a deep, vivid blue that caught the faint light, and her silver-white hair fell in long strands around her face. In her hands she held a staff, its tip marked with strange glowing symbols. She studied him with wide eyes, as if she too had seen a ghost. "You're human," she said, her voice trembling yet strong. Her accent was strange, like the old dialects. In forgotten recordings, Kalen didn't answer right away. He had heard stories of blue-skinned wanderers in the deep desert's nomads, who claimed to be descended from starfarers. But none had ever spoken to him. He had been told they feared his kind, if they even knew humans had ever existed. She stepped closer, brushing sand from her robe. "I thought your people were gone. The old chronicles say the war ended with your extinction." Her words were cautious, but her gaze was searching. Kalen felt the weight of her statement. Extinct. That was how his enemies had wanted it, wiping humanity from the stars. Yet here he was, alive, facing someone who clearly did not expect to meet him. And in that moment, the storm outside felt like the least dangerous thing in the desert. The storm outside grew louder, a relentless force hammering against the cave's entrance. Sand swept in small streams across the floor, forming tiny ridges near the stone walls. Kalen kept his distance from the woman, his eyes fixed on her staff. It was not a simple walking stick. The metalwork was too precise, the engravings too deliberate. He had seen weapons disguised as tools before, and the faint hum from its core made him certain it was more dangerous than it appeared. She seemed to sense his caution. "My name is Sarai," she said, lowering the staff slightly, but not letting go. "I was tracking the storm when it turned violent. My people used the wind to navigate the dunes, but this one," she glanced toward the entrance, her lips tightening. "This one is wrong. It moves like it has purpose." Her tone made Kalen's shoulders tense. He knew storms could be strange in the deep desert, but a storm with purpose meant something or someone was controlling it. Kalen took a slow breath. "If you know a way to survive it, now's the time to share." His voice was steady, but his mind raced. If she truly believed the storm was being controlled, then someone might have driven it toward them deliberately. And if someone knew a human was here, that could only mean trouble. Sarai's gaze flickered toward him again, lingering on his face as if searching for a truth he had not yet spoken. "You are alone," she said, almost like it was a question. Kalen gave a short nod. She frowned. "That is dangerous. Alone is how they find you. Alone is how they erase you." Her words stirred something in him, a shadow of memories from the war. Soldiers dragged into the sand by machines that burrowed beneath the dunes. Camps swallowed in storms that appeared from nowhere. He had survived those days by never staying in one place too long. Sarai moved toward the deeper part of the cave, her steps careful and quiet. She set the staff against the wall and began to unroll a small bundle from her satchel. Inside were metal discs, each etched with spiraling lines that glowed faintly when touched. She placed them in a circle on the floor, the light from there. Patterns growing brighter. A shield, she explained, against more than just the wind. If the storm carries eyes, they will not see us here. Kaelin watched closely. Her hands were steady, her movements practiced. This was not her first encounter with such a threat. When she was done, she sat cross-legged within the circle and gestured for him to join her. He hesitated but stepped inside. The air changed almost instantly. The roar of the storm dulled, the smell of hot dust faded, and for the first time since she had arrived, the tension in his chest eased. Sarai looked at him with quiet intensity. "Tell me, human, what do you know of the war's end?" Kaelin gave her a hard stare. He had never told anyone the truth, but something about her presence made him feel that hiding it now might be more dangerous than speaking. "I know it didn't end the way your chronicles say," he said. "The war wasn't won, it was paused. They scattered the survivors, hunted them across the worlds, and buried the memory of us. We were meant to fade, not fight." His voice hardened. "But I didn't fade." Her eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in thought. She leaned back slightly, studying him as if weighing the value of what he had just revealed. The glow from the discs reflected in her eyes, making them look like molten silver. "Then you should know," she said, "that not all of my kind wanted your people gone. There were those who fought to protect you. They were silenced, just as you were. And now I think the storm is here for both of us." Her voice was low, but the meaning was sharp. The storm was not a random danger, it was a weapon, aimed with intent. Outside, the wind howled like an angry beast, but within the shielded circle, their voices were the only sound. Kaelin tightened his grip on his cloak. "If that's true, then whoever controls it knows exactly where we are. Your shield won't hold forever." Sarai nodded. "That is why we must move when it passes, together." The word hung between them, heavier than the sand-laden air. Kaelin had not fought beside anyone in years. But now, with the storm clawing at the cave and an unknown enemy closing in, he realized that survival might no longer be something he could manage alone. The storm raged on for hours, its strength showing no sign of weakening. Sand pressed against the cave like a living wall, the sound a constant hiss. Inside the circle of glowing discs, Kaelin kept his focus on Sarai. She sat perfectly still. Her eyes closed, as if listening to something far away. He wondered if she could sense the storm's source. Her stillness was not the stillness of rest. It was the stillness of a hunter waiting for the right moment to strike. When she opened her eyes again, there was something sharper in them. "It is not just wind," she said. "There are voices in the storm, carried on frequencies only my people use. They are calling for me, and for you." Her words sent a cold weight through his chest. He knew then that this was no coincidence. Whoever commanded the storm wanted them alive, at least for now. That did not make the situation any safer. Kaelin adjusted the knife strapped to his thigh. "If they're calling for us, then they know exactly where we are. The question is why they haven't come in yet." Sarai's expression tightened. "Because they can't breach the shield without revealing themselves. But once the storm passes, they will move. We must be gone before then." Her voice held no hesitation, only certainty. Kaelin recognized the tone. It was the same way he had spoken to soldiers under his command during the war. Sarai rose to her feet and picked up her staff. The glow at its tip pulsed faintly, matching the rhythm of the discs on the floor. She reached down and touched one of them, and the light began to fade. "The shield will end in moments. Once it does, the storm will return in full. We use the chaos to move," Kaelin nodded. He was already tightening his cloak and securing his water canister. The desert was unforgiving, but a moving target was harder to find. The instant the last disc went dark, the roar of the storm rushed back into the cave. Sand swirled in through the opening, stinging Kaelin's cheeks. Sarai led the way, moving low and fast into the swirling wall of dust. He followed close, keeping his eyes on the faint outline of her golden robe ahead. The air was thick and dry, each breath scraping his throat. The storm hid everything beyond a few steps, but Kaelin knew that somewhere within it, their pursuers were waiting. They moved across the dunes, each step sinking into the shifting ground. Sarai kept her pace steady, her staff angled slightly forward as if guiding her path through unseen hazards. Kellen's boots sank deep into the sand, but his training kept him balanced. The wind howled around them, carrying distant echoes that did not belong to the desert. Shapes flickered in the storm, tall and thin, their movements too precise to be tricks of the eye. Sarai glanced over her shoulder. "They are close." Her voice was barely audible above the wind. Kaelin gritted his teeth and pushed forward. The storm's fury made the world feel endless, but then a shadow loomed ahead. A rock formation, jagged and black against the shifting gold, offered a narrow gap just wide enough for a person to slip through. Sarai ducked into it without hesitation. Kaelin followed, feeling the pressure of the wind ease as the rock shielded them. Inside the gap, the sound of the storm became a dull roar. Kaelin leaned against the stone, catching his breath. Sarai, however, did not rest. She pressed her ear against the rock, listening. "They are not following directly," she said. "They are circling, driving us toward something." Kellen's stomach tightened. Herding prey was a tactic he knew well. It meant the enemy had already chosen the battlefield, and he and Sarai were walking straight into it. Kaelin stepped forward and drew his knife. "If they want to trap us, we'll make them regret it." His voice was calm, but his pulse was steady with the readiness of a soldier. Sarai met his gaze and gave a small nod. "Then we turn their trap into ours." She moved deeper into the rock formation, her staff casting faint light on the walls. The path narrowed, forcing them to walk single file. Every sound was amplified, from the scrape of boots on stone to the faint hum of her weapon. They emerged into a small hollow sheltered on all sides by stone. Above them, the sky was only a slit of swirling gold. Sarai crouched, tracing a quick pattern in the sand with the tip of her staff. "We hold here. When they arrive, the wind will work against them. The rocks will funnel them straight into us." Kaelin understood immediately. It was risky, but in the desert, risk was survival. And if the storm was truly their enemy's weapon, then sheltering from it would be their advantage. The hollow was silent except for the low hiss of the storm above. Kaelin crouched near the narrow entrance, eyes scanning the shifting light beyond the rocks. Every instinct told him the enemy was close. He could feel the pressure in the air, the kind that came before a strike. His grip tightened on the knife, its edge dulled from years of use but still deadly in the right hands. Sarai stood beside the wall, her staff resting lightly against her palm. The faint glow at its tip had grown brighter, casting gold across the sand. "They are moving in," she said quietly, slowly. "They know we are here." Her voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the tension in her stance. She adjusted her robe so it hung closer to her body, freeing her arms for movement. Kellen's eyes narrowed as shapes began to emerge from the swirling dust outside. They were tall, their limbs long and thin, their armor gleaming faintly under the dim light. Each one carried a weapon unlike anything he had seen before, curved and sharp with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. They advanced without sound, their steps synchronized as if controlled by a single will. The first of them reached the entrance and paused. Kaelin stayed still, his breathing controlled, watching as it tilted its head slightly, as though tasting the air. Then, with a swift motion, it stepped forward. Kaelin lunged, his knife slicing across the creature's arm. A bright arc of light flared where the blade connected, and the creature staggered back. The others reacted instantly, moving with sudden speed toward the narrow gap. Sarai raised her staff and slammed its end into the ground. A shockwave rippled outward, lifting sand into the air like a curtain. The advancing figures hesitated, their forms distorted by the swirling grains. Kaelin used the moment to strike again, driving the first attacker into the wall. It collapsed to the ground, its weapon falling into the sand. Sarai caught it with one hand, her movements fluid and precise. The storm's howl grew louder, funneled by the rock walls. It pressed against the hollow, pushing the fine sand into every crevice. Kaelin stepped back to Sarai's side, his eyes flicking between the entrance and the weapon in her hands. "That won't hold them for long," he said. She nodded, twisting the weapon so that its light dimmed. "We don't need long. Just enough to make them believe we've fallen." Kaelin frowned but understood her plan. Sometimes the best way to win was to appear weak. They retreated deeper into the hollow, leaving clear tracks in the sand. Sarai placed the captured weapon on the ground, making it look discarded. Then she positioned herself against the wall, hidden in shadow, while Kaelin crouched behind a narrow outcropping. The enemy would see the tracks, see the weapon, and think they had fled in panic. It was a risk, but the narrow space meant only one or two could enter at a time. Minutes passed before the first shadow moved into the hollow. The figure stepped carefully, scanning the walls, its weapon held ready. Kaelin stayed still, letting it move closer. When it reached the discarded weapon, it bent to examine it. That was the moment he struck, his knife flashing once in the dim light. The figure collapsed without a sound, and Kaelin pulled it aside. To clear the path for the next, two more entered together, moving faster than the first. Sarai stepped forward, her staff slicing through the air in a sharp arc. Light burst from its tip, blinding the attackers for a heartbeat. Kaelin moved in that instant, cutting low while Sarai struck high. The fight was quick, but brutal, the narrow space leaving no room for hesitation. When the last one fell, the hollow was filled with the sound of heavy breathing and the fading hiss of the storm. Sarai leaned on her staff, her gaze fixed on the entrance. "There will be more," she said. Kaelin wiped the blade clean on his cloak. "Then we don't wait for them, we move now." She nodded, stepping over the fallen figures. Outside, the storm's strength had begun to wane, the golden light softening, but the danger had not passed. If anything, the quiet that followed felt heavier than the storm itself. Kaelin adjusted the strap on his pack and glanced at Sarai. If they were willing to risk this much to take us, then they won't. "Stop." Sarai's eyes met his, calm but unyielding. "Then we make sure the next time they find us, it will be on our terms." She stepped into the open, her robe catching the last traces of wind. Kaelin followed, the sand crunching under his boots, both of them vanishing into the fading storm together. The storm had passed, leaving the desert in a strange, heavy stillness. The dunes stretched endlessly under a pale sky, their sharp edges softened by the new layer of sand. Kaelin walked beside Sarai, their footprints marking a path across the untouched surface. Each step carried the weight of what they had just survived, but neither spoke. The silence was not emptiness. It was preparation. They moved toward the jagged cliffs that rose in the distance. Kaelin knew the rocks would offer better cover than the open dunes. Sarai's staff glimmered faintly as she scanned the horizon. Her gaze shifted often, like a predator wary of being hunted. She knew as well as he did that the enemy would not give up. They would regroup, track them, and strike again. The only choice was to stay ahead. By midday, the sun burned high above, and the heat shimmered off the sand. Kaelin paused under a narrow rock overhang, pulling his water canister from his pack. He drank sparingly before handing it to Sarai. She accepted without a word, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "We are being followed," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, but sure. Kaelin did not need to ask how she knew. He could feel it too, the faint vibration in the ground, the way the air seemed to shift. "They want us alive," Kaelin said. "That means they have a reason." Sarai lowered the canister and met his gaze. And that reason could decide more than our lives. If you are truly the last of your kind, then you are more than prey. You are a symbol. If they take you, they erase what you stand for. Her words cut deeper than the desert heat. Kalen had fought to survive for himself. Now he saw that his survival might mean something greater. The cliffs loomed closer, dark against the bright sand. The narrow passes between them could be used for an ambush. Kalen's mind worked through possibilities, recalling tactics from battles long past. Sarai must have been thinking the same, because she slowed her pace. If they follow us in here, the rocks will give us the advantage, she said. But we must be fast. Kalen nodded. The desert rewarded speed as much as strength. They entered the shadows of the cliffs, the temperature dropping instantly. The air smelled faintly of minerals, and the ground was harder beneath their boots. Kalen scanned the high ridges looking for signs of movement. The enemy could be waiting above, ready to strike from both sides. He signaled for Sarai to move toward a narrow ledge. From there, they could see both the entrance and the deeper path ahead. Minutes passed. The wind whispered through the stones. Then, faintly came the sound of movement. Figures emerged from the sunlight at the far end of the pass. Their armor caught the light in quick flashes, their weapons ready. Kalen's pulse steadied. This was the moment. He glanced at Sarai, and she gave a single sharp nod. Together they moved. Kalen struck first, leaping from the ledge and landing in the sand before the lead attacker. His knife flashed, forcing the enemy back. Sarai's staff swept in a glowing arc, knocking two more off balance. The narrow pass made it impossible for the enemy to surround them. Every move Kalen made was deliberate. Every strike aimed to disable rather than kill. The goal was not to destroy them all, but to break their will. The fight was quick and fierce. Sand and dust rose in the air, mixing with the glow of Sarai's staff. When the last of the attackers stumbled back toward the sunlight, they did not return. Instead, they vanished into the dunes, leaving their wounded behind. Kalen stood still, breathing hard, watching the empty path. Victory in the desert was never permanent. But for now, it was theirs. Sarai leaned on her staff, her gaze following the enemy's retreat. "They will come again," she said. Kalen wiped the blade on his cloak. "Then we make sure next time they regret it even more." Sarai's lips curved into the smallest trace of a smile. "Next time, human, we will be ready." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows between the cliffs. They turned toward the open desert, side by side, the sand stretching before them like a challenge. Kalen adjusted his pack and glanced at Sarai. If the universe thinks humans are extinct, maybe it is time to remind them we are not. Sarai's voice was calm but carried a steel edge. "Then let us remind them together." Their footprints led into the fading light, two figures against an endless horizon, moving not just to survive, but to fight for the future. Asterisk.